Hello and welcome to Spectrum News Recap for the week. My name is Xavier Robert, coming to you live from Uyo, the capital city of Akwa Ibom State. Let's take a look at the headlines. Proof of ownership fee for vehicles. Plus, U.S. Supreme Court overrules President Joe Biden's $400 billion student debt cancellation plan. Details of these stories and more in a moment. We'll begin the recap this week with the #1 citizen of Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu, who has urged Nigerians to imbibe the virtue of sacrifice, which Eid al-Kabir celebration exemplifies. The president's spokesperson, Dele Alake, revealed this in a statement. Alake said Tinubu made the appeal while speaking to reporters after observing the Eid al-Kabir prayers at Dodon Barracks Prayer Ground, Lagos. Tinubu stressed the need for unity and cooperation towards building a better Nigeria and appealed to Nigerians to eschew ethnic and religious rivalries. The president also prayed that the sacrifices turn to prosperity, stressing that the country must have faith in it, have faith in themselves, believe that as citizens of the country, they can join hands to build the nation. Meanwhile, President Tinubu, who has renamed some federal airports after several prominent Nigerians. The renaming of the airports was announced in a memo released by the Federal Ministry of Aviation dated June 1, 2023, and signed by Joke Olatunji for the Director of Airport Operations. The statement noted that the President renamed the airport as part of reforms of the aviation sector. The Maiduguri Airport was renamed after the immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari and the Port Harcourt Airport after the late nationalist Obafemi Awolowo, while the Nasarawa Airport immortalized the late founder of the Sokoto Caliphate, Usman Dan Fodio. Also, the Benin Airport was renamed after the late Oba of Benin, Oba Akenzo II. Ebonyi Airport was named after the late Senate President Chuba Okadibo, and the Ibadan Airport after the late Premier of the Old Western Region, Ladoke Akintola. In the meantime, President 3 presidential election. He spoke in Ijebu-Ode, Ogun State, when he visited the palaces of the paramount ruler of Ijebu land, Oba Sikiru Adetona, and the Alake of Eba land, Oba Adedotun, by the presidential election, despite the ineffective cashless policy implemented by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Reflecting on the challenges in the build-up to the 2023 presidential election, Tinubu recounted his concerns about the confiscation of funds and the failure of the cashless policy, and how he had previously sought wisdom and guidance from Oba Adetona during his visit to the palace. Well, now from the number one citizen, President Bola Tinubu, who this time partners to fight the menace of drug abuse. He urged stakeholders to take a people-centered approach in addressing drug addiction, saying addicts are also humans who deserve understanding and support to recover from the downward path of drugs. Tinubu said in his opening address at the National Conference to mark this year's International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Drug Trafficking at the State House, Abuja. The president, who was represented by the secretary, recognized the individual and addressed the social stigma that comes with the menace. Meanwhile, the Secretary of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, Shadrach Haruna, has shared Nigeria's stance on the criminalization of marijuana use. Haruna said this while having a conversation with newsmen. He addressed the prevalent misconception surrounding drug decriminalization and emphasized that while other nations have decriminalized marijuana, they are implemented by those countries. Haruna explained that the decriminalized species in countries like Canada are those lacking tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive component responsible for altering one's state, ranging from almost 45% to 100%, making them incomparable to the decriminalized variants. In a separate development, former President Muhammadu Buhari has said that leading a country like Nigeria is one of the hardest challenges in life. Buhari, who stated this in his Salam message via a statement issued by spokesman Garba Shehu, saluted Muslims as he wished them a happy Eid, and to those on pilgrimage, Hajj, Umrah, and a safe return home. The former president, in his message, urged Nigerians to fully support the administration of President Bola Tinubu to succeed. Away from that, the federal government has started the issuance of Proof of Ownership Certificate (POC) for all categories of registered vehicles nationwide. Unveiling the new policy at the Bagoda Culto Press Center, Alausa, Lagos, the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Transportation, Abdul Hafiz Torio, annually. From the Red Chambers now, Senate President Godswill Akpabio has canvassed for maximum patience, understanding, and support for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the quest to make life more meaningful. More from the legislature now, where Speaker of the House of Representatives Tajuddin Abbas has advocated a review of salaries for workers in the country. Abbas said to take a look at what an average worker would need to be paid as salary in view of the current economic reality. He said there was need to come up with a living wage that would take care of the basics of a person, such that Ribadu formally took over from Major General Monguno as the National Security Advisor within the week. It will be recalled that President Bola Tinubu had last week appointed Ribadu as the National Security Advisor (NSA). He was earlier appointed as the Special Advisor on Security to Tinubu before the current position. Ribadu promised to live up to the expectations of Nigeria of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) under former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Away from that now, the newly appointed service chiefs have promised to respect human rights while discharging their constitutional mandates. The Chief of Defense Staff, Christopher Musa, would go about their duties professionally with respect for human rights, urging the citizens to see the armed forces as theirs. The intelligence chief also promised that they would bring about peace that Nigerians would be proud of. On this year's general elections to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC). According to a post on the electoral body's Twitter handle, the EU mission was received by the INEC chairman Mahmoud Yakubu and the national commissioners of the body. It noted that while the EU acknowledged that the election took place as planned, it said operational failures which challenged the right to vote contributed to the reduced trust in the process. Recall that the EU had on February 27, 2023 in INEC. Meanwhile, the federal government has sought the support of the European Union in its quest to deepen and consolidate on democratic practices, particularly as it concerns the nation's electoral processes. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akume, made the appeal while Barry Andrews in his office. According to a statement by the Director of Information, Willie Basi, the SGF said Nigeria had enjoyed considerable improvements in its electoral processes over the years, while appealing to the EU for support to consolidate on the gains made of an increasing dire humanitarian situation in northeastern Nigeria. According to reports, more than 40,000 people have been killed and 2 million more displaced in fighting between the army and jihadist groups, including Boko Haram, over the past 14 years. The UN humanitarian, the situation becoming even more catastrophic. In a separate development, the National Emergency Management Authority, a statement read by the Acting Base Information Officer Chris Gaga, the NEMA Director General Mustafa Ahmed made the appeal through a delegation to NNS Victory led by Fortunatus of some medical students and commanded the confidence and capacity of the Nigerian Navy. Ahmed maintained that the Navy remained a critical stakeholder in the search and rescue operations, particularly in the maritime environment and other disaster management in the country. Security matters now, with the Nigerian Navy has reshuffled the appointments of top senior officers comprising 56 rear admirals and a commodore. The Director of Information, Adedotun Ayo Vogan, in a statement said those affected by the reshuffling are Olusanya Bankole, formerly the Director of Logistics, Defense Space Administration, now appointed as Policy and Tactics, is now the Director of Logistics, Defense Headquarters, among others. Meanwhile, the Police Force Public Relations Officer PRO Olumuyiwa Dejobi has said that the deployment of policemen was reportedly reacting to a viral video of an unidentified VIP seen being escorted on foot by no fewer than 7 armed mobile policemen. Adejobi condemned the act which he described as disgusting, and promised to fish out the policemen in the video and bring them to book. Back here, Akwa Ibom State Governor Pastor Moino has warned local government chairmanship and councillorship aspirants for the next local race is yet to be blown. He has also stated that the state is busy stabilizing with a new administration in place to ensure its smooth takeoff. Governor No, who was addressing land stakeholders in some local government areas who have started spending their hard-earned money on consultations for the positions, even when the state electoral umpire is yet to clarify on such issues. He also pointed out that issues bordering on established zoning arrangement in the local government areas have been brought before him for clarification the zoning arrangement. Meanwhile, Pastor Moino has called on all to close ranks and work for the success of his administration, assuring that he is poised to leave behind sustainable legacies for the next administration to consolidate during Episcopal Thanksgiving service commemorating the birthday and retirement of Bishop of Uyo Diocese of the Church at Dominic Utuk Avenue, Uyo. Governor No, who likened his administration to the biblical John the Baptist, said as the forerunner of the greater heights, and solicited prayers from the Christian fold for his dream to be materialized. He acknowledging that the support sought to his emergence as governor of the state, and assured the Thanksgiving service with government functionaries as a mark of honor to the retiring Bishop Asuko Antai and wife Dame Victoria, who have given their all to the Lord's vineyard and retire hale, hearty, and meritoriously. And the earlier Akwa Ibom Command Obodbasi Sian has called on the society to drop stigmatization and discrimination. Our correspondent Estelle Toyo, in commemoration of the World Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking Day. The state commander, while stating the statistic that victims of drug abuse are rehabilitated The drug abuse. The 2023 theme for the campaign is People First. Stop stigma and discrimination. Strengthen prevention.
Months, our statistics reveals that we have arrested 239 suspects, comprising of 197 males, 42 females, and the total drugs seized are 1,465.99 kg, convicted and jailed 59, cancelled 160, treated and rehabilitated 15 clients. Everybody should have respect. They are discriminated against. They would not like to speak out. They would not like to come out. And the menace will continue in it. So the best thing for us to do is to come face reality as it is and enable them to get help. Don't forget, cannabis is planted in Nigeria, and Akwa Ibom is not an exception. We've arrested a lot of some farms, so to speak. This is cultivated here, and it is the largest drug of abuse in NDLA. There's something we do periodically called Operation Burn the Weeds. So we burn them, we get clearance from the courts, I get clearance from my boss, I get clearance from the state government, they allocate a place, get the judge to come as well, and then we openly burn it for everybody to see, and it's been tested before burning to assure the public that we are actually burning the weeds.
Meanwhile, following the data released by United Nations Office on Drug and Crime in Nigeria stating that about 14.3 million people aged between 15 and 64 abuse drugs, residents of Uyo as well as stakeholders have again called on government and law enforcement agencies to curb the menace of drug abuse in the society. Also speaking, the Chairman, Association of Community Pharmacists, the Akwa Ibom State Chapter, Tony Anderson, said drug abuse has brought us to tackle the crisis head-on. Our correspondent, Blessing Dixon, has the details.
Drug abuse is ravaging us seriously, and we need to come together to fight it. I think part of the problem is the failure of the family. Frustrated, very, very frustrated. And some of them think it is drug that they can use to soothe their frustration, and it's unfortunate. So there is need for many to drugs. They are not doing themselves good. And sometimes also it's also peer pressure. Others will force them to enter drugs. We have seen that it is not good, and there is need to up the awareness.
That's the reason why they take drugs.
I believe the cause of drug abuse, number one, is bad company. Bad company. And number two, a lot of mad people you see sometimes it's because of drugs that they take. And sometimes their brain does not carry what they take. So what I think the government should do about it, like I've heard that they're raiding some areas where they do hide and take those things. So I believe if government continue with that, I think the society will return to normal.
We are calling on government at all levels to sit up. Government is not serious on this. You know, when government is serious,
drug abuse to a standstill, then crimes could reduce by as much as 80%, because you cannot have crime and not have drug abuse.
Prevention, people say, is better. I am Blessing Dixon, reporting for Spectrum Television.
In the meantime, residents of Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital, have lamented the high cost of transportation due to the fuel subsidy removal by President Bola Tinubu. They said a drop from one distance to another has 100 naira, as the case may be. Also, the price of fuel has increased to 450 naira, 480 naira in most filling stations, some 500 naira and above, while speaks apply the total petroleum products needed for the entire country.
What I can say about the subsidy removal is that it's really affecting life. So let them try and cushion the matter so that everything will normalize. The fuel price is really affecting. 550 is affecting. Before I used to buy 1,500 naira fuel, but now I buy about the issue.
Before we buy 220, 210, depends on the station that you went to. If it is government station like NNPC, you buy it 197. Others you buy 225. Before now, I don't use up to 5,000 naira fuel to go where I go to. But now I will use 9,000. It will not even take me to that place and come back. It's affecting me seriously, affecting my business, affecting my family. Well, I don't say they should remove the subsidy, because when the subsidy was there, it's people that were eating the money. But let them do something that will favor A and B, not only the rich.
A place that you are normally paid 50 naira now is 250 naira. Sometimes it's 300 naira. If you are a businessman that used to sell something of 500 naira, you have to increase to 1,000 naira. The government is removed. There is no how the government will be able to use the fuel amount you used to bought before. That refinery is not enough. We need.
Still to come in the news. Tuned now to Africa, where Kenya's President William Ruto has signed into law his government's first finance bill, which seeks to boost revenue through raising taxes on a number of items. President Ruto, who was elected last year, said that the government needs more money in order to be able to pay off the debts racked up under the presidency of his predecessor Uhuru Kenyatta, bill from 8 to 16%. Reports say employees will also hand over 1.5% of their gross pay for a housing levy that will go into a fund which will be paid to build homes for low-income people. In the meantime, the head of Ethiopia's electoral has had reason to leave her post. Parliament still has to accept the resignation, and she's a former judge and political prisoner, and her appointment more than 4 years ago was seen as part of reform measures introduced by a new government. In 2018, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed took office pledging to end decades of authoritarian rule, someone who would never surrender even to the government. The delay of the elections seen by political elites in the country's Tigray region, in which more than 500,000 people are estimated to have been killed. Away from that, the African Union AU force in Somalia has handed over 3 more military bases to the Somali army as part of the gradual withdrawal meant to conclude by the end of next year. Reports say by the end of June that the plan is to withdraw around 2,000 troops from Somalia. Meanwhile, Tuesday's handover took place in Adali, mission's Burundian contingent. Still in Africa, security forces in Burkina Faso say unidentified assailants have killed 31 soldiers and 3 members of the Homeland Defense Volunteers, a group of civilians given basic military training. The army said more than 40 assailants were killed, noting that the volunteers' work alongside the envoy took place in the northern province of Bam in the central north region. Meanwhile, a court in France has sentenced to life imprisonment a former Rwandan police officer Philippe Hategekimana after finding him guilty of genocide and crimes. Militias reportedly killed hundreds of thousands of Tutsis and moderate Hutus. The prosecutors described him as having played a central part in carrying out the killings, not only murdering people but inciting others to do so. Hategekimana, who had worked as a senior gendarme in Nyanza, a town in the south of the country, allegedly fled to France after the genocide, in a significant political setback when it overruled his landmark program to cancel the student debt of millions of Americans. The court said Biden had overstepped his powers in over many Americans decades after they finished their studies. The conservative-dominated court voted 6-3 in the ruling, saying the president should have obtained specific authorization from Congress to launch the program. It said Biden was mistaken in using a 2003 law, the Higher Education Relief Opportunities for Students Act, to justify the debt relief plan. 6 Republican-led states sued, saying the 2003 Act, which aimed to help former students who joined the military after the September 11, 2001 attacks, does not authorize Biden's loan cancellation. To look for new ways to achieve diverse student bodies, the court's conservative majority overturned admissions plans at Harvard and the University of North Carolina, the nation's oldest private and public, wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges vested skills, belt, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. In a separate dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the court's first black female justice, called the decision a tragedy for all years, including as recently as 2016. Still on the foreign country's president. According to him, he wants to quickly implement additional reforms in his government. His cabinet appointments are expected to be released also, with 99.6% of the votes counted. Ministry ministry reports say with 158 parliamentary seats, the Prime Minister has an absolute majority in the 300-seat parliament, making his party one of the strongest people's parties. Lukashenko says Russian mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin arrived into Prigozhin and believed to be carrying him into exile landed in Belarus from the southern Russian city of Rostov, a flight tracking service had confirmed. In the meantime, U.S. President Joe Biden has said it is too early to draw definitive unity on Ukraine. Biden stressed, however, that he and key Western allies were in close touch, and that he had also told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that U.S. support will remain strong. He said that no matter what Biden said, he told Zelensky over the weekend as rebel Wagner troops briefly took over a key southern Russian city and threatened to enter Moscow. Still on the foreign scene, former U.S. President Donald Trump can be heard this ad by a news platform. The 2-minute recording comes from an interview Trump gave at his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club in July 2021 for people working on a memo by his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. According to reports, parts of Trump had mishandled classified documents after leaving office. Meanwhile, the audio file played late Monday and also obtained by newsmen includes a moment when Trump seems to indicate he is holding. Away from that, smoke from Canada's wildfires was wreaking havoc on air quality across Ontario and a dozen U.S. states within the go. Alerts were issued from Ontario, northern Minnesota, and Michigan across to New York and down to the southeastern states of North Carolina and Georgia. The latest dangerous air conditions West, South, and Midwest wilts under a brutal heat wave that is affecting millions, with the National Weather Service issuing a heat index forecast as high as 115 degrees Fahrenheit in northern and central Texas. In a separate development, 4 Armenian soldiers were killed, which has been at the center of a decades-long territorial dispute between the Caucasus enemies. According to the Artsakh Defense Army, units of the Azerbaijani armed forces opened by Azerbaijan. In a later statement, the group said that the situation along the border was now relatively stable. The news came as the United States mediates 3 days of new. It will be recalled that Secretary of State Antony Blinken opened closed-door talks with the adversaries' foreign ministers just outside Washington on Tuesday in the second such negotiation. Soviet republics, but the United States and European Union have been increasingly active as Moscow gets bogged down in its invasion of Ukraine. Away from that, Sri Lanka began a 5-day bank holiday to allow the crisis. It won independence from the British in 1948. There are fears that the government's restructuring plan could lead to volatility in financial markets. Debt restructuring can involve the extension of the period over which a loan is reduction on some government bonds held by international lenders. A day earlier, he had said banks were excluded from the domestic debt restructuring exercise. Elsewhere, a body was found within the week in the rubble of a collapsed building in Paris 6 days after it was destroyed. Those who declined to be named said the body was too charred to allow immediate identification. Fashion school on the city's touristy left bank. Reports say she had been teaching at the academy for 20 years and was on the third floor of the building at the time of the blast. Meanwhile, the cause of the academy, Peter Carmen, is among the worst hurt, Le Parisien had said, after rushing to cut off the power supply when a smell of gas spread through the building. Up for a traffic check outside Paris, prompting expressions of shock and questions over the readiness of security forces to pull the trigger. The 17-year-old was in the Paris suburb of Nanterre early in the week when police shot him dead after he broke road rules and failed to stop. Emergency services tried to resuscitate him at the scene, but he died shortly afterwards. Meanwhile, a video circulating on social media shows two police officers trying to stop the vehicle and one pointing his weapon at the driver through the window, and the police inspectorate has opened an investigation into possible intentional killing by a person holding a position of public authority. Now in business, the World Bank has expressed its support for the federal government's decision to remove subsidies and unify the country's exchange rate. This follows President Bola Tinubu's recent speech advocating for these measures during an event organized by the World Bank to access Nigeria's economy over the past 6 months. On Tuesday, country director also called for measures to mitigate the impact on the population moving forward. Dr. Chowdhury disclosed that the world supporting the country's economic reforms. Also, a lead economist at the World Bank, Alex Sainot, projected that the removal of fuel subsidies would yield fiscal gains estimated at about 3.9 trillion naira in 2023. Sainot cautioned that the subsidy removal might lead to a temporary increase in inflation in the coming months, but predicted it would contribute to disinflation in the medium term. Still in business, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, has limited the daily cumulative transaction limit to 50,000 naira. The transaction limit for contactless payments took effect on Tuesday, June 27, 2023. CBN's Director of the Payments and Systems Management Department, Musa Jimo, disclosed this in a circular to banks, other financial institutions and permanent service providers. Jimo said the higher value contactless payments are transactions that exceed the above stated limits and will require appropriate verification and authorization. The Apex Bank also issued guideline-less payments from time to time, noting that stakeholders shall be permitted to set limits in line with the bank's limits. More on business news now, as data from the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, shows that the currency in circulation, CIC, reached a year high of 2.5 trillion naira. The CIC comprises the currency outside the banking system and the vault cash of banks. According to the data, currency in circulation rose from 2.3 trillion naira to 2.5 trillion naira, the highest recorded in 2023, and since the Supreme Court reversed a CBN policy on new naira notes. Meanwhile, currency outside banks, also in circulation, suggests the country is gradually going back to trends recorded in 2022, when the currency in circulation grew month and month, climaxing to about 3.3 trillion naira in May 2022, between February when in recent years. Still to come in the news. Nigeria rise in latest FIFA ranking. Do stay with us. Many thanks for staying tuned as we move on now to health, where the national agency praised good hygiene practices in bread production. In a statement during a stakeholders meeting with the Lagos chapter of the association, which was made available, urged the confectioners not to compromise the quality of bread, the production of bread, but said that it should not be an excuse as operations endangers the health of the public. The agency would not hesitate to take, which states that about 13 million people aged between 15 and 63 have asthma. Stakeholders in Uyo as well as concerned citizens have spoken. On psychologist at the University of Uyo Teaching Hospital Uyo, Dr. Chika Nwabweze, said not all nasal issues are asthma related and encouraged citizens to visit the hospital for proper diagnosis and treatment. Now in sports, Nigeria has released in May, gained 6 points and moved to 39th. The Eagles' rise in the rankings was largely due to their impressive performance in the recent Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers against Sierra Leone in the month under review. Still in football, the Interim Management Committee (IMC) of the league has announced that the 2023-2024 Nigeria Professional Football League (MPFL) season will commence on the weekend of August 26-27. The abridged 2022-2023 season ended earlier this month, with Enyimba winning their 9th league title at the Super 6 playoffs in Lagos State. After the successful completion of the abridged season, which was necessitated to bridge the gap of the Nigerian league calendar, the IMC also announced that clubs should begin the process of club licensing and close on September 1, 2023. Now in tennis, former world #1 Caroline Wozniacki announced she is set to return to professional tennis 3 years after retiring to start a family. Wozniacki, aged 32, bowed out in 2020 after winning 30 WTA titles, including her sole Grand Slam triumph at the Australian Open in 2018. Wozniacki has 2 children with former NBA player David Lee, 2-year-old Olivia and James, born last October. And now on entertainment, American singer, songwriter and actress Madonna has reportedly been discharged from hospital and is home and feeling better after an intensive care stay. News of her ill health was shared by her manager, who said she had suffered a serious bacterial infection. The 64-year-old was due to begin a 7-month final stages of rehearsals ahead of her extensive world tour. More on entertainment now, as the 2023 BET Awards went down last Sunday night at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, US, with Burna Boy doing nothing to Future's Wait For You, featuring Canadian rapper Drake. Chris Brown and Usher beat Burna Boy to the best male R&B and pop artist. It was a tie between Chris Brown and Usher, as SZA and Beyonce each won 3 times the Lifetime Achievement Award. Still on entertainment, barely weeks after Yoruba Nollywood actor Murphy Afolabi died, another veteran Yoruba actress Sidikat Odukanwi, popularly known as Iyabo Oko, has died. According to her daughter, who broke the news via her Instagram account, the actress battled an undisclosed ailment. Her death. And that's all we have for you at this time. Do ensure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of which you can find on our website, spectrumtv.ng. You have been watching Spectrum News Recap for the week. My name is Xavier.